Hi everybody, welcome to Socially Unacceptable. My name's Chris Norton, I'm the Managing Director of Prohibition PR. I'm here with William Ockenden, my business partner. And this week we have got so much to cover. This podcast is probably one of the most exciting podcasts we've done, and it's an interview with Josh. And Josh Lachkovic is the MD and founder of a growth agency, but he has some fascinating insights on how to grow even today after iOS 14 on Meta and make your business grow. But similarly, he's got some really interesting insights into failing and a business that's failed. And he's been through that. He's been through the spike of the pandemic to the drop after the pandemic. So honestly, this is probably one of the most interesting podcasts we've done. So be sure to watch the rest of it and let us know what you think in the comments. So what would you tell your 20-year-old self today if you bumped into yourself?
In general, I think take the opportunity when it's there and say yes to all the stuff and you lean into it. Don't be scared of failing.
As a creative agency, or rather, a creative integrated agency, it's really refreshing to hear actually creative is down to the quality creative rather than just technical nous that's going to get consumers engaged.
And also don't have really complicated structures and targeting, because that doesn't work anymore, which is, let's face it, the way that it was being done 18 months ago, and it was working brilliantly. Then overnight it just didn't work as well. But you're an entrepreneur and you're fighting to keep the company going, right? That's what we do as business owners.
From your perspective, how did that feel personally? Was there a sense of relief? Did you feel failure?
I hope I'm allowed to swear on this podcast.
Welcome to Socially Unacceptable, from F***ups to Fame, the marketing podcast that celebrates the professional mishaps, mistakes and misjudgments while delivering valuable marketing and life lessons in the time it takes you to eat your lunch.
Hi everybody, welcome to Socially Acceptable. This week we've got a very exciting guest, Josh Lachkovic, who is a growth agency founder of Amphora, which is a creative growth agency. And Will is joining me in the studio again this week. Hi Will.
Hello there.
Are you looking forward to speaking to Josh?
I am actually, and I won't go into it in too much detail, but Josh has got some really interesting things to say about failure, which I'm looking forward to digging into, and also wine, which I'm a massive fan of.
Yeah, wine. There's lots to get into here, and the first question was, so this podcast is all about ups, and our technology is up 3 times this afternoon already. So let's get into it. I want to ask you. So the question I wanted to ask you is, what is a growth hacker? What's a growth specialist? And has it got a bad rep? Because agency owners like Will and I are getting a lot of messages from growth hackers who tell us that we can have 10 customers next week if we just sign up tomorrow. How do you guys, how do you approach it, Josh?
Yeah, first of all, I get a load of those invites as well, and I'd say you can ignore most of them. No, first of all, actually, thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be on, and looking forward to chatting about failing as much as possible today. In answer to the growth question, growth isn't just a modern name for marketing, as I think a lot of people have kind of thought it might be, and it's got a bit of a bad rep because of that. Growth as a discipline started at Facebook and really combined a few elements, one of which was this experiment-driven approach to running things. So everything was about scientific experiments. You create hypotheses around how something will work. You put a test together, you put that test in a small part of your audience and get some results and data, and then if it works, you roll it out to your wider set of users. Part of it was about that. Part of it was this data, very heavy data side of it, which you had big data science teams kind of impacting on growth in general. And then the kind of third part was really about thinking of how this user psychology element played in, like understanding why people did certain things, kind of what type of things people were using platforms for and building platforms for those people. So for us, growth is about that. It's about bringing together a process, this experiment kind of culture, lots of data and analytics, right, and user psychology. And we apply that to our kind of core marketing channels, which paid social, for example, is one of our core ones.
Yeah, and I think we'll dig into paid social in a moment. So do you want to talk to us about the type of clients you work with? Is it agencies, or do you actually work with, brands directly, or a combination of both?
Yeah, it's all brands directly. They're mostly consumer businesses, all startups, kind of Series A type level startups. So a couple of the big names, or the bigger names, are people like Dishpatch, who are a restaurant meal kit. We work with Thriver, who I used to work with years ago internally and became a client when I started the agency. And then smaller companies who are much newer, people like Motherroot, who are a F&B, non-alcoholic F&B brand. So yeah, mostly consumer businesses, startups quite early in their lives who are growing digitally.
And I guess this might be a bit of a how long is a piece of string question, but is there kind of commonalities in terms of the sort of challenges they face when it comes to growth, at the point when you speak to them, or is it all sorts of factors that potentially limits their growth?
It's an interesting world because every founder, if you ask them the question, do you wish you were growing more, probably is going to say yes, which is both a blessing and a curse for people who have a growth agency like I do. So we get a lot of people who might be needing to unlock that next level of growth. They've probably raised a round of funding and been growing quite well, but to be able to raise their next round, need to demonstrate whatever kind of percentage increase that might be. It could be people who've hit a plateau and just can't get out of it, or are struggling to grow and much lower. So typically people come to us when they want that next level unlocked and understanding what that looks like. I think they are brands mostly growing through paid social. That's our kind of core channel offering at the moment. We do other parts of the mix as well. We build landing pages and do retention work and stuff like that, but the core offering is paid social. So it's very much brands for whom that is their main channel. But yeah, likely would have hit some type of kind of plateau, looking to unlock that next level of growth, and we'll probably start having a conversation with us.
So paid social, right? Okay. So I've seen I've seen some notes that I've got down here from my assistant, and it says that you said something about iOS 14, that it was a big opportunity. Now, paid social, for those out there who have been in paid social since it came out or since it's been around, it was amazing. Conversion ads were amazing. They were brilliant. They were working great. And then Apple decided to play this little update where the privacy got changed, so you had to opt in for advertising. And conversion ads off any Meta, literally, and I've done the math on this, it is about 1/10 of what it was. So why is that a massive opportunity? Why have you put that so massive? Because everybody that I know that's worked a lot, and I've listened to a lot of podcasts as well on the ad side of it, they felt that it's really affected and I've seen it on multiple clients, like where it's still there. You could still get conversions from paid social, organic, digital conversions, website conversion sales, but it's about 1/10, if not 20, maximum 20% of what it was. So did you think that was a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, first of all, Meta have done a lot to improve that kind of now. I think when you go back to when iOS 14.5 came out, that first year afterwards was a pretty catastrophic year.
Yeah.
Meta late last year introduced something called Conversions API, CAPI for short, and that's been rolled out kind of much more widely now. So it was earlier last year, and that has definitely closed the gap on some of that data. It's a bit more technical setup. So, historically, Facebook advertising was great for, anyone who wants to go and test these channels out. Is really cheap to do so. You could install the pixel, no problem. I think the barrier to entry now is higher as a starting point. The cost barrier to entry is higher as well. Like the era of, your local butcher shop or something, trying out some ads to see if it's going to work probably is over. And the bigger players are still spending lots of money. Like let's not kind of beat around the bush. The people who are spending money are still spending a lot of money, and they're doing that because they're getting results from it. The opportunity comes from because I think it actually makes all of us better marketers. And when I started doing Facebook ads in, I don't know, 2013 or something, it was more like PPC. It was more like doing paid search. It was very much like amending bids and duplicating ads and doing it was quite like hacky stuff. It was very much like living in an Excel document all day.
Yeah.
And now it's gone back to first principles of marketing. Is why do people do things? It's understanding their behavior, their culture, trying to capture attention in milliseconds of time. That's a real big challenge today, is how do you capture attention in milliseconds of time? And that kind of takes us to first principles of marketing, of really understanding like how to sell stuff, what makes people tick. And as a result, when you get good at that, it's far better for the brands, because for brands know more about their customers, they're going to have far better scale opportunities. When they eventually get to doing TV or out of home, they're going to know so much more about their customers because they've been learning so much more. So from my perspective, it is an opportunity. It has also got rid of some of the smaller players on the platform, like some smaller brands aren't advertising now. So you do have that opportunity, if you're willing to test and fail, to bring it back to the topic of failure, while you're learning. Then I think there's lots of opportunity there.
So what I'm hearing is, or what I'm assuming you're saying here is the focus now more on creative and customer understanding?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The advantages you gain from what was once called media buying, or what I guess what you'd see as media buying, are much slimmer. It's not dead. Those are still important, but the impact of those is much slimmer. Whereas, our team now, we think more in terms of creative strategists as the heroes of those accounts, more so than the media buyers. And that's going to continue to grow. We'd imagine it go forward 2 years, it'll probably be very heavy skewed towards creative strategists rather than the media buyers.
So ROI then, if we go to everybody's favourite thing on paid social, ROAS. What sort of ROAS was it pre-iOS 14, and what ROAS? Because you're saying now it's great. I like what you're saying there. You're saying basically that the smarter people can still make campaigns work. It is more challenging, but better thought and better application of how people are acting, customers are behaving, will still work, which is true. Which is why it does still work, but not quite as good as before. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think the measurement piece has changed as well. We were very reliant on what you'd think of as last click attribution for most of the 2010s. So we would trust that last click that happened, and Facebook would say we got that conversion, and Google would say we got that conversion. You kind of relied on that data a lot more as a reflection of how your channels were going. What we recommend now is no data is perfect. You have to use multiple sources. There's no single source of truth. Look at Facebook data to compare Facebook ads with other Facebook ads. Look at Google data to compare different ad groups with other ad groups.
Yeah.
But in terms of measuring channel effectiveness and overall ROI, you probably need to do slightly more complicated measurement than you would have done a few years ago. And so I think the bigger players who can afford to do that, because a lot of it costs money, a lot of it requires large amounts of data, that's why they're still investing in these channels, because they can trust they are working. So yeah, the ROI is there. It might not look like it in the platform as much as it once did. And it definitely is more expensive to advertise there. But I think the ROI is still there, just might not reveal itself in the same way.
And you mentioned, the smaller, the mum and dad corner shops, the
local butcher.
Yeah, the SMEs used to really benefit from particularly the acquisition side of Facebook ads. Are you saying that it's not for them anymore? It's not working for them anymore?
It's just for the big boys.
I mean, I guess it's like what kind of scale are we talking about? I think any business that has raised money is still advertising, or any consumer business which has raised money is still advertising on there. It's kind of fine from that perspective. For lots of bootstrapped businesses, one of our clients is bootstrapped and spending 10,000-15,000 a month on Facebook, and they've got to that level themselves. But I think if you go back 5 or 6 years, you saw people who might be spending £1,000 a month or £500 a month on the platform and getting some results out of that. And I think that level now is much harder to do. You kind of probably need to be in a bracket saying, let's commit 5k a month plus,
Yeah.
or it's probably much harder to get there. So I think that's where it's dropped out.
Okay.
Should we dig into some of the other social platforms? So we've obviously talked about Meta. We see significant ad spend going through platforms like LinkedIn, TikTok. What's the kind of your macro view of that market then? Are other platforms delivering sales in a way that's more effective than Meta?
Audience is really the kind of determining factor. TikTok had a real kind of moment in the sun last year. It was very cheap in the early parts of last year, and so we did some of our kind of clients I was working with directly at the time had some good success on TikTok last year. We're not doing lots of TikTok now, and I think it's because most of our clients are advertising to probably like a 30 to 50 millennial kind of bracket. We don't have many brands who are primarily targeting, say, Gen Z or kind of people in their early 20s. That said, if you are advertising to that bracket, then there's a lot of scope on TikTok. It is at that age group cheaper probably than Meta to advertise on. Potentially not the scale that you have on Meta, but it is definitely cheaper. LinkedIn is a tricky one. LinkedIn, first of all, only is going to really work for B2B, and it is much more expensive than Meta is. And we actually have B2B clients who are advertising on Meta rather than LinkedIn because it's cheaper for them. You have to think about, at the end of the day, a business is a group of people, and your buyer at a business, even if it's a B2B, is still an individual. And I browse Meta and Instagram all the time and get ads for marketing software and agency gurus can help 10x my agency. I get all those ads all the time in my Instagram feed.
Growth hackers. 10x your
I get
10x your agency today in 30 minutes. Watch this YouTube video.
Yeah, so I'm going to buy their course for $999 down to $10, and it'll all be fine.
By the end of this 24 minutes, your agency will be worth. So I've got a question. Okay, so what about YouTube ads then? Do you do that, or is it just paid social ads?
YouTube we see slightly differently. YouTube we see less as a performance channel. It's more of a kind of brand channel, and so the types of creative which you need to run on those platforms are much more different. The types of ads you're running inside TikTok or Instagram are broadly the types of ads which you would see in your stories or your reels anyway. Shot on a mobile phone, quite scrappy, often quite scrappy, entertaining, subtitled with native text, that sort of thing. Whereas YouTube still has that slightly higher production value to it. It requires a slightly higher level of storytelling, and for us, it's just not a specialism at the moment. Okay. Long term, it absolutely will be, but for the time being, it's not a specialism for us.
So, Josh, you've talked to us about the kind of the barriers to entry being a little bit higher for Meta. There needs to be we need probably bigger budgets, more technical nous. I know that a lot of marketers will be listening to this who probably previously did ads on Meta with great success, and they might have either reduced budgets on that platform or stopped altogether. Now, what advice would you give for them? Should they jump in both feet again? Should they go all in? Should they look at other channels? Where should they spend their money?
If you're the type of business which doesn't have people searching for you, which is a lot of startups, like a lot of startups are creating products which people don't yet know they need, then something like Meta is still a really good channel for you, or TikTok or something else like that. In the old days it would have been TV, but that's very high barrier to entry. The lower barrier to entries are still things like Meta, and they do still work for that, and so I would recommend them. I think the way you manage them is much different now. So I would, the things like audience targeting aren't really a thing anymore. All these complicated account structures aren't really a thing anymore, and so actually run things very broad, use your creative as your targeting, and whatever your creative looks like, make sure it appeals to your target audience, answers a customer's problems, like explains how it's going to solve a problem. And if you do that, you will find it working if it does work for that channel. So definitely don't swear it off as long as you're in that kind of bracket. That said, if you're a product which people do search for a lot, paid search, SEO are still things I'd definitely concentrate potentially first, and then longer term think about paid social.
But you would say, because you're right, all the butchers, bakers, candlestick makers out there, they were, spend £1,000 a month on meta ads. Actually now, if you're doing conversion ads, you need to be spending around about 5k a month and doing what you're doing, which is broad targeting, which is what I've heard a lot of people say, oh, broad targeting works better than, because it went so niche, didn't it? It was really, really targeted and brilliant, and it's completely reversed itself back out to broad again. So it's interesting.
So the creative itself acts as the targeting. Those people that aren't interested in the creative naturally won't click through, and then I suppose you can retarget the people that engaged with that initial creative. Is that something you'd recommend?
Yeah, exactly. So Meta, specifically talking about that, has a new targeting algorithm called Advantage Plus Shopping Campaigns, or ASC for short. ASC has removed loads of targeting capabilities. You can't even target based on gender. So we have ads which are selling products which are exclusively designed for women, and we put them through ASC, and Meta very quickly, within like a day, shifts that budget like 99% female, 1% male. And it's because for targeting, the ad talks to a woman. It talks very explicitly about problems that only certain groups of women are going to be going through, and so it finds that audience. And within a few days, you suddenly see the ages it's advertising to. Most of the spend's going into the age bracket you expect. It's going into the gender you expect. If it's kind of country specific, it will find that as well. But it does cost money to get there, because it's got those first few days where it's just showing it to everyone. Men obviously aren't responding to it, and then the flip side obviously is you have products on the other side as well. But yeah, it's all about creative.
Interesting, because it used to be that Meta, take the 3 days for learning, and then the learning would happen. But if you look at YouTube ads, for instance, apparently the longer you run a YouTube ad, the better it gets. And it sounds like the broad targeting on the Advantage Plus, like you're talking about there, it sounds like that's what's happening there. It's the same sort of thing. That actually, the longer the campaign, you're not getting the ad fatigue that you used to get. It actually starts performing better. Is that fair?
Yeah, to a certain extent, yes. You do still get ad fatigue, but then at the same time, because you've got fewer campaigns, and an individual campaign might have a dozen or so ads in it, which that could run for months, and so the amount of data in that campaign is massive, and so it's going to be very hard for that to be beaten, because it keeps on getting better and better at finding those people. So yeah, it definitely does have an element of that, which again is different to what it was when I was starting advertising, when we'd turn campaigns on and off every hour or two sometimes to kind of game the system. So yeah, it is a lot more similar to YouTube in that respect.
Excellent.
So we've dived into a bit technical. I want to hear a bit more about your history then, and because we're going to get to your fuck ups. Let's get into. So where have you come from? And you started in digital marketing, right? Is that right, Josh?
Yeah, it starts off. First ever job was SEO and content writing inside a PR agency. Did that for a few years.
Was that Hotwire?
Hotwire, yeah, that's right. So
I had a job. I had a job interview though, years and years ago. Did you have to do the exam?
Did you?
He didn't get it.
No, I managed. I
didn't know what a dangling modifier was, so I didn't get in.
Oh, do I know what a dangling modifier is?
Do you know? I was in the. In those days, they had an exam, and it was like a 30-minute exam, and there was 30 people in the room, and we were all going for the same job. And the examiner went out, and I just turned around and went, "Does anybody in here know what a dangling modifier is?" And this guy goes, "I'm doing further English at Oxford, and I don't know what a dangling modifier is." And I don't know if it was a trick question, but I had to Google it afterwards. But there you go. You got the job though.
Modifier. I didn't have to see that test, which I'm very happy for, because I'd have failed. So I got that job. I was doing kind of bits of copywriting and writing like about tech for like a few blogs and stuff like that. So I originally wanted to be a journalist. That was the first thing I wanted to be when I was 18, and realised there was basically no jobs in journalism, and so started copywriting. Was always a nerd, so I always built my first computer when I was 10, and I've just been a nerd ever since. And so digital marketing seemed like this like nerdy techie stuff with this writing stuff together. And that was the job at Hotwire, was really learning about SEO, learning analytics and GA and all that data and stuff like that. Did that for a few years, got a taste for startup life because I really enjoyed kind of the startup culture of some of the companies they were working with. Went to Packed Coffee, which was just before they raised their Series A. Small team, so went from an agency of 200 down to a team of 12. Did print marketing there, so like a completely different channel, print marketing, inserts, magazine advertising, stuff like that. Then went to a comms and kind of producty role inside an education group, which is a completely different shift again. Did that for a few years, kind of basically built a website for this business, started selling these online courses, which was years before COVID. They probably would have done much better later on. And then went to join Thriver, which is a health tech where I joined as their first employee and head of growth. And that was 2017. And that was probably the real kind of start of that period of my career when over the 3 years I was there, kind of learned more in 3 years than you probably do in 10 years in most businesses. When I joined, it was just the founders and myself, and they had about 500 customers. And by the time I left, it was a 55-person team, 100,000 customers acquired, which myself and the team I'd kind of put together had been responsible for that. So learned lots there. Then went and launched my own startup. So had the bug, wanted to be a founder. Had always enjoyed wine. Had done a wine course. Thought the way that wine courses were taught was backwards. I wanted to bring it online and set up Wine List, which started as a podcast, then turned into a newsletter, then turned into kind of video content plus wine as a subscription. That was 2019. I went full time on it, March 1st of 2020. Yeah, but I went full time 1st of March 2020. two weeks later, lockdown started.
Okay.
That said, was that not a good thing?
Was that not a good thing? Yeah, because wine, everybody sat at home drinking wine.
That was... Our numbers did the kind of hockey stick thing. We went from... I think we did £3,000 of revenue in February 2020, and in April we did £25,000, and it was 50,000 2 months later. So
that was basically the Ockendons. So they're just ordering all their wine for the summer. Wow.
So yeah, it was absolutely brilliant.
Amazing.
So okay, why aren't you still running it now?
Yeah, what happened then? Come on, wait.
Don't mean to trigger you.
No. So so it was a good thing, but it was also there was a curse to that side of that growth, because it was unusual behavior for the market. That kind of gave this completely different buying behavior, where what we were selling, which was online video courses, group tasting sessions, and wine sent to you in the post, was the perfect lockdown thing, because everyone was at home. Everyone was wanting to learn more. Everyone was drinking a lot more than they were historically. And so it looked like we were doing brilliantly. We went out and raised a load more money, went and hired 3 more people on the team, rented a warehouse, increased all of our cost base absolutely massively. And then the pandemic started to filter out, and every month restrictions came down. Our core retention was just going down and down and down at the same time. And we spent 2021 essentially realizing we didn't have what in startup world is called product market fit, which is the kind of notion that you've got a product which is solving a very large problem for a market which can sustain that business in it. And they say that when you have it, it feels like gravity. It's kind of you can't help but feel you've got it. And it felt like we had it in COVID. And then as the world returned to normal, it became immediately clear we didn't have it. And so that year we tried loads of different things. We changed the product around. We launched a kind of a single serve type portion rather than a bottle, which went through your letterbox. So Packed Coffee, but for wine.
Right.
We launched an event series, seeing if we can make events work as a thing. We went to a more strict e-com model of just selling wine, see whether that could sustain itself. And then we tried just selling the courses, for digital courses as well. And basically all of these things just didn't end up working. And, we were running out of money and tried going to raise some more money. But when your numbers have been flat for 5 months after hockey stick the year before, it's not a great investor story. The business shut down September 21. We were in the middle of a fundraise and just didn't get enough money together to make the business work. So,
there's a lot to unpack there. That feels like fair play to you for sharing that. That is a really honest assessment, and that sounds tough because running a company is tough. I feel your pain there. So at what point did you think, fuck, this is it? We're gonna have to shut the doors?
Probably far too late, to be honest, than I should have done. The real turning point for me was about 2 weeks before we actually kind of shut the doors, and that was we were supposed to be raising around. We'd had some money kind of committed, or what I'd been in my head was committed, what I understood to be committed, which would have been about 200,000 or so towards the round. We were trying to raise 500,000. And when it got to kind of mid-September and I looked into that portion of money, there was a lot of kind of umming and ahhing about when it would be ready and if it would be ready and stuff like that. And that was the moment I thought, okay, I think this might be it. And I was at a friend's wedding when I had that call. It was like the morning of a friend's wedding. So I drank a lot of wine at that wedding, and
get your money's worth.
And got my money's worth. And then the following week, just sat down with all the investors who we had initially and these new investors and said, look, where are we? And that following week, it was they didn't have the money. And so that was, by that point, we were in a lot of debt because we were kind of going on the assumption that at the end of September, we were going to have this money in the bank.
Yeah. And there just wasn't the reserves there.
Point. Yeah.
They went.
So that's when it actually happened. But just to add in, what I think I probably should have done would, I think in hindsight, I probably could have, I think we were probably signs earlier on. It's a really, really hard thing to know, to choose when to stop. And to a certain extent, I took the decision out of my hands and just let the money run out. And I think actually, I think if I was to do that again, there would have been signs going, right, actually, do you know what, we've tried these 5 things, none of them have worked. This business either needs to be restructured quite a lot. And I probably would have known that 3 or 4 months earlier. But you're at the time, I kind of.
But you're an entrepreneur and you're fighting to keep the company going, right? That's what we do as business owners. We keep going. We got to fight the merry fight. I get it.
But also knowing when to quit. And from your perspective, how did that feel personally? Was there a sense of relief? Did you feel failure? Talk to us about that.
I had one of my early investors who was an angel investor. He was a founder as well. He called me up, I think the following morning. I sent an email out to all the investors on the Tuesday or Wednesday, and he called me up the next morning. And he said, so you fucking done it now, and you realise none of it fucking matters. And it was like the best thing I could have heard because, I had all these worries about I've lost all this investors' money and all these other things. But that was kind of a really good piece of advice that none of it fucking matters. I hope I'm allowed to swear on this podcast.
No, mate, it's called fuck ups to fame. I won't worry about it.
Yeah.
we actually beep it out a lot of the time, but don't worry.
It was, that was really important. I think the bit leading up to that was the hard part in a way. Like, so much of your identity is kind of built into being a founder and being an entrepreneur. And, it's like everyone knows you as this person who's running this business, who's doing this thing. And you don't know what this unknown is going to be like of beyond there. And actually, as this investor told me, beyond is fine. Like it doesn't matter that you fucked up. Like you've learned from it and go and do the next thing. And, I'm confident if I was ever to do a business that needed to raise money again, he would probably be one of the first checks into that business. Now I've chosen not to go and do a business that needs to raise money again. But yeah, I think it was hard in that moment leading up to that decision. Actually, once the decision had been made, it was probably more relief after that moment. The tension was the months leading up to that point.
And that point you mentioned actually about your identity being tied up with you being a founder, that's fascinating. And I suppose that is another factor that gives you more fear of the unknown, isn't it? You're seen as this person. What have you got? If this ends suddenly tomorrow, where does that leave you?
Yeah, I think I've probably known I've probably wanted to, I don't know, since I was a kid, like I always like sold stuff. I was always a person who like bought stuff at car boot sales and sold it on eBay in the early days and stuff like that. So like I've always had this entrepreneurial side in me, and just the thing which I've sold has changed a lot over my lifetime. And so I think one of the saving graces I had was, while wine has always been a really big passion of mine and remains a big passion today, it wasn't like my life's purpose to become a wine founder. It was like my life's purpose was to become an entrepreneur, and it just happened that my first big venture was trying to do this wine thing. I think for people who might kind of go down their passion route completely, and then if that business fails, it's probably an even bigger knock for those people, because it's not just like their identity as a founder, but it's their identity as like their whole life is about this thing, whereas my whole life isn't about wine, as just a large part of it is. So yeah, there's multiple levels to it, but I was probably quite lucky in that respect as well.
And just a final question on that. Let's assume lockdown didn't happen. Would that mean your business wouldn't have seen the growth and you may have given up, or would you have had more organic, steady growth and you'd still be a founder today? What have you thought about that?
So I have actually. I think it'd be interesting.
Gradual growth, you mean? Like rather than the hockey stick, it just like a normal business that's starting out grows organically.
Like a profitable, good business, rather than like
it's going like that. Like the line's supposed to go up the X and Y axis properly. Do you think it'd still be there, or was it because you had such quick growth, like Will says?
I think I was searching for that then, and I think I'd just been in a business which went from 500 customers to 50,000 in the space of 18 months or 2 years or something like that. And I enjoy that. Like my career in marketing, I've enjoyed making things grow really fast. Like I like it. I do just like it, and it's I get a good kick out of it. So I think I would always been motivated by the fast path to growth. But I think the business potentially could have taken a very different turn, because if we'd gone for a few months without that growth, that would have been the signal that we need to change quicker. And we'd have done so without the overheads of, we've got an 8-person team, we've got all of this stock, we've got all of this warehouse space, all this stuff, which meant we were losing money every month, which we took on to meet the demand we'd kind of hit. I think potentially we'd have had the space to change direction kind of much faster. So it might, I don't know, it's impossible to say, but I think if it was still around, it'd be a completely different looking business for sure.
Okay, so today for Amphora, what do you do now then? So how has that affected your approach to how you do business now?
I mean, it's a profitable business from day one. Like, it's a cash flow positive business. Like, I'm not going to take on investment like we did with Wine List, which has kind of changed that systematically. I still want to grow like fast and big. That's just in my DNA, I guess. Like, I don't want to be a boutique small agency forever. I think the one thing which has really changed in my kind of behavior, or the biggest change I'd say, is I've got a much better grip of finances now than I ever had before. I used to rely on a bit of kind of what accountants would say to me at the end of the day, and what an ops person would say to me, and what a growth person would say to me, or all these different people in the team. I would kind of listen to that rather than really dig in myself. And that probably cost me a month's runway ultimately when I was doing Wine List, like, without knowing that. So I probably on an almost daily basis know what our bank balance looks like, knows what our cash flow looks like.
You have to.
I like live and breathe it. Yeah, I know. Well, I wish you told me that 4 years ago.
That's the common theme. We've heard that from a few people, haven't we?
A lot of founders.
Yeah.
I hope this is a cathartic experience for you as well, because it is for me talking about these things, because I know. So there's some of the things you've talked about there are fascinating, like the fact that you've never taken funding. So Will and I, neither have we. We've never taken any funding for our business. And actually, when you talk about raising funding for growth, we work with a lot of consumer brands here, and they need to grow, and then when they need to grow, you have to raise funding. I've never been through that process of having to go to angel investors. What was that like? Did you feel like you were standing in front of Stephen Bartlett and you having to do the Dragon's Den thing, or was it just write a formal proposal? This is what growth we're seeing. This is where we're at. This is what we project, and please give me some money.
It's a real mix, and actually, this is something which my clients now find very useful, but I know this process, and so excuse me, I've been able to talk about what the marketing is doing, what the growth is doing, but then also be able to provide that context for what investors are going to look for. So that is something which I think has been useful for them. In terms of what it's actually like, though, some of it is like going in front of Dragon's Den. Some of it is super casual. Like I went for a lunch once with somebody who was somebody I'd done a partnership with in an old business, and he'd been a founder, and I was just saying, look, I'm going to do this thing. What should I do? How would you go about it? And at the end of that lunch, he said, I'll put 5K in. And I hadn't even paid for lunch. So I was just like, oh, okay. I didn't realise that's what this was. So maybe this is going to be easy.
I'm not going for lunch with you. That's for sure. If it's 5K investment every time, carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean it was great, but then you would also have people who, whether they were doing it consciously or not, really liked grilling you, and seems to kind of really, oh, what's your 5-year forecast? It's like we're a 3-month-old business, like. I can show you a 5-year forecast, but it's dragging this spreadsheet just 50 rows to the right. Like, if you really want me to do that for you, I can. So
it's a guesstimate,
I think some people really enjoyed it.
It's an educated guess, is what it is. At that point, until you've got a couple of years.
Yeah, it was a mixed bag. Some people super friendly, some people liked being pitched to, and some people really grilled you. But for the most part, it was a pleasant experience.
And so you talked about the business. What is the one big fuck up that you made at any point that you felt was the mistake, the biggest mistake you made, or was it just that gradual thing? Because that sounds to me like what you've described here is more circumstantial. I don't class that as your fuck up. I class that as you got exceptional, and I've got a few clients that had that as well. Exceptional growth at a period of bizarre times, and everybody went online. I've got a number of online clients, and they had exceptional growth, and then it just went back to normal. And so you haven't fucked up there. Was there anything you did feel that you did make a big mistake with?
I think the fuck ups were, the entrepreneurs have to be optimistic, right? Like we have to believe that we have some ability to make something good. Like that is an optimistic trait. And, you have to believe that despite all of the crap which is thrown against you, and most businesses, all the data tells you businesses are going to fail on average. Like every business on average is going to fail. Entrepreneurs believe that they're 1 in 100 or 1 in 5 or 1 in 20, whatever those numbers are. And so by nature, we are optimistic people. And that's part of that problem, which kind of falls into that. Like when things were good, I didn't sit and question why they were good. I didn't sit and question whether they'd be good forever. I didn't do that kind of, okay, let's think about this 3 to 6 to 9 months in advance. I just kind of let it be good. And as it started to change, as a result, things don't change overnight. It's not like one day our acquisition costs went up by 10x or retention went from 60% down to 10%. It didn't happen overnight. It was gradual. And so, the first month that happens, it's within a margin of error. And the second month, it's within a margin of error. And then the third month, it's like, oh, it's January, so it's dry Jan. That's where people are doing it. And then before you know it, your retention is 60% down to 40%. And that's a troubling thing. And so, the kind of not kind of questioning about early enough. And, I didn't speak to enough customers. And that was kind of part of the thing. It took me too long to adapt when that did change. And people talk about pivoting in startups. Like, I pivoted within the realms of an educational wine product. And actually what I should have really questioned was, do people want an educational wine product? And the answer was almost certainly no. Like, if you asked 100 wine drinkers, do you want to know more about wine? 99 will say yes. If you ask those 99, will you spend an hour a week learning about it? It'll be less than one. It'll be like 1 out of 99. And our business required it to be like 20 of those 99 to be able to be the business we wanted to build. So they were
Josh,
just questions which I didn't ask myself.
Yeah.
If you met yourself 20 years ago today, what's the big one piece of advice you'd give you? Because obviously you were a keen, eager young man, ready to, and you love growing, and you're a positive person. So what would you tell your 20-year-old self today if you bumped into yourself?
I'd say you don't need as much security as you think you do. I think I waited a long time to start a business because I was worried. I had a lot of anxiety around, what I needed. When I started WineList, I worked up until the week before I started it. I was still working at my old job. I raised money around my old job because I didn't have, loads of money in the bank. I don't have kind of family money or anything like that to like take 6 months off and work out what I want to do. But like, I didn't start a business around another job properly because I was scared that you wouldn't be able to do it, or a boss wouldn't like it. And I'm sure lots of bosses wouldn't like it, but like, I think I'd have said kind of try and shake that fear a little bit earlier than you did, because I was, I don't know what, late 20s or something until I kind of finally took that plunge, and probably could have done it, a few years earlier. So yeah, I think kind of, but in general, like I think take the opportunity when it's there and say yes to all the stuff, and you lean into it. Don't be scared of failing. Yeah.
And on that, so kind of just summing up then, lessons in failure. What I'm hearing is know when to quit, rather than sort of stringing something along. Realizing it doesn't really matter if you do try something, it fails, your whole identity isn't necessarily bound up in it, and kind of knowing when to pivot and pivoting decisively. Is that fair in terms of kind of lessons in failure? Anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think, keep on talking to customers. They'll tell you more than you'll get from any spreadsheet. And I think that's easier said than done, because people don't like hearing negative stuff. But yeah, I think customers reveal a lot, and I wish I'd done more of that when I was at WineList. I think I'd have learned faster.
Fascinating.
That's good. So you obviously just done 40 minutes with us talking through if you were us, who would you next invite on our podcast to tell their story?
Oh, that's a good question. There is somebody called Charles Instone, who is the founder of a supplement company called Wild Dose. He's bootstrapped this business. He sort of building in public, I think. And he was CMO for like a CBD company for a long time.
Okay.
Very, very smart marketer, and doing really interesting things on with his own brand as well.
Bootstrapped. Explain the term bootstrapped. You've used it 2 or 3 times today.
Sorry, this is
startup
jargon,
term, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, bootstrapped is meaning you haven't raised money from anyone. So you're doing it by pulling up your bootstraps and going and doing it manually the old school way. It's probably quite derogatory in many ways, but I think it's just become a term now. And
yeah, I've not heard that. I've learned something today.
Yeah.
It's good.
Big in like the indie hacker community.
Have you got? Yeah, I was just going to say, have you got? Do you want to? Where can people find you online, Josh, if they want to speak to you about what you do?
So the website is helloamphora.com. Amphora is AMPHORA.com. Helloamphora.com. You can Google me if you can get my last name spelling right. I'm Josh Lachkovic. I'm on Twitter at Josh Lachkovic, and LinkedIn as well. It's just LinkedIn Josh Lachkovic or whatever the LinkedIn addresses are. So yeah, helloamphora.com, and then those two on Twitter and LinkedIn.
We'll stick your details in the show notes on the YouTube and on the podcast as well, so people will be able to find you nice and easily.
Yeah, so thanks very much for
Perfect.
that, Josh. I mean, that was a little bit different to some of the podcasts we do, but a really fascinating story about startup lessons, failure, and then some really helpful technical
I think we're going to get a lot of interest in
Yeah.
this pod, to be honest. And thanks for sharing and being so honest. And really interesting and great to meet you properly.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Lewis, that was a real pleasure. I really appreciate that.
Well, Will, that to me is the best podcast we've done yet. And I'm not saying that because me and you were brilliant, which obviously we are.
And no discredit to any of our previous guests, worth mentioning. Thank you for everyone that's appeared on the show so far.
Yeah, and thank you for listening. But I just thought Josh was so honest with everything that he had to say about failing and being an entrepreneur and having a business that's struggled for various reasons. It was fascinating, wasn't it?
It was, and fairly unique circumstances actually to how the business grew and eventually closed. And I think the other side of it was he brought real value to our listeners in terms of some of that technical ads-focused activity. So yeah, absolutely fascinating. And I think certainly from a meta ads targeting perspective, it's been fairly turbulent the last 2 years, hasn't it? So I think a lot of marketers will be listening to that with interest.
Oh yeah, there's so many marketers out there struggling with paid social since iOS 14. It's why I opened with the question on why he felt it was an opportunity. I haven't seen the opportunity. To make it work, it still works, but it is so much tougher. But his attitude to it was refreshing and quite interesting to hear.
And as a creative agency, or rather, a creative integrated agency, it's really refreshing to hear actually creative is down to the quality creative rather than just technical nous that's going to get consumers engaged.
Yeah, don't just do it. And also don't have really complicated structures and targeting, because that doesn't work anymore, which is, let's face it, the way that it was being done 18 months ago, and it was working brilliantly. Then overnight it just didn't work as well, and now it's broad, and all down to clever, strategic, creative, and how people act. What is the customer going to do? I also thought it was interesting about when he was mentioning the Advanced Plus targeting, where it picks out using AI. Obviously, AI comes into every podcast for some reason that we're doing at the moment. That it then decides where that audience is. I thought that was interesting because it never used to be that way.
And that's a seamless plug for our podcast 2 episodes ago with Andrew Bruce Smith that really dug into the role of AI in marketing.
Yeah, AI. Well, we're going to be covering it again because obviously it's massive. But Andrew's podcast was interesting, so check that out with the interview with Andrew Bruce Smith. But yeah, Josh had some fascinating things today that he covered. Definitely have to get him back on the show in like a year's time or something, find out where he's going, because growth hacking is an interesting area and he definitely had some interesting things to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for listening to Socially Unacceptable. Thanks for listening. And don't forget that we also run a series of free webinars and seminars that you can attend absolutely free. You can find them by Googling prohibitionpr.co.uk and just clicking on upcoming events. It's near the podcast section. You can't miss it. Upcoming events. All free. You can register online. Nice and simple. Also, if you want to subscribe to us on YouTube, you can get notified of every video that comes up. If you found this one on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever, we are actually available on YouTube, and you can find it. You can be notified of every video that we do. So please do subscribe to us, and you can find us on YouTube under Prohibition PR. And as always, if you've got a fuck up that you've been involved in and you want to share with the show, and you feel that you'd like to share with the world anonymously, feel free to send that in, and we'll do our best to share it with everyone. But until next week, we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Socially Unacceptable. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a 5-star review. Don't forget to follow us on social media, on Twitter and Instagram at ProhibitionPR. We would love to hear some of your career fuck-ups so we can share them on the show. For more information on the show, search Prohibition PR in your search engine and click on podcasts. Until next time, please keep pushing the boundaries and embracing the socially unacceptable.